Hello everyone. In large cities where land is scarce and the population is dense, apartments or dormitories have become a familiar choice for those in need of accommodation or even a place to make a living, right? This is especially true for students and workers, as these places are affordable and convenient for work and study. However, there are also some drawbacks, with noise pollution conflicts being perhaps the most common. In a residential area in Kanagawa, Japan, such a situation escalated from minor annoyances to a major altercation, ultimately ending in an unexpected and tragic way. The main character in our story is a young man named Daiheiso Matsubishi, born in June 1928 in Koto, Tokyo. He was the second son in a family where his father owned a bookstore and his mother was a housewife who took care of the family. While in school, Matsubishi had quite good academic performance and was even elected class president. But he had a congenital speech impediment, leading to frequent mockery from his classmates. These childhood experiences profoundly impacted his personality. Gradually, Matsubishi became increasingly self-conscious and avoided social interactions, feeling comfortable only when he was alone. In 7th grade, his teacher asked him to read aloud in class. Overwhelmed by anxiety, Matsubishi forgot what was written in the book, and combined with his speech impediment, everyone in the class burst out laughing. This incident aggravated his long-standing insecurities, making him detest school even more. In 1945, at the age of 16, Matsubishi graduated from middle school. At that time, during the final stages of World War II, most able-bodied young men were conscripted into the military. Matsubishi, however, was assigned to work at a military factory in Yamanashi. The war ended when he turned 18, and Matsubishi began working at the Japan National Railway. Over 3 years, he became deeply involved in gambling, eventually falling into debt. To repay this debt, Matsubishi embezzled 39,000 JPY from public funds, which was soon discovered, leading to a 12-month suspended prison sentence. Following this incident, he was dismissed from his job and returned to his hometown in Yamanashi to live with his parents. Occasionally, he worked on farms or took on part-time jobs. This mundane lifestyle quickly bored him, and Matsubishi decided to stay at home, doing nothing. His brother's constant nagging eventually drove him to leave home for Tokyo, seeking work in the Shinbashi area. However, the stress led Matsubishi to develop neuralgia, a type of prolonged headache caused by mental stress and anger, along with an overwhelming sense of pressure. By 1959, now 31 years old, Daiheiso Matsubishi married through a matchmaking process. Unfortunately, this marriage was far from ideal. Matsubishi, now the poor son-in-law in a wealthy family, discovered that his new wife had already been married once. Despite being married, she continued to be involved with her ex-husband, causing Matsubishi great distress. He could tolerate the hardship of living with in-laws, but infidelity was something he could not bear. Thus, he decided to divorce, a move that not only liberated him, but also granted him a substantial settlement. After the divorce, Matsubishi worked at a factory in Hachioji, Tokyo, often staying in the dormitory there. The factory operated on a 3-shift schedule, and sometimes, after a night shift, Matsubishi would return to the dormitory only to be disturbed by music from the adjacent room. To avoid conflict, he endured it, but over time, Matsubishi became highly sensitive to noise, to the point where even morning birdsong or insect chirping became unbearable. The dormitory housed many families, and the noise from their children further tormented Matsubishi. Unable to tolerate the auditory assault, he would shout back in the dormitory, earning a reputation as a hothead among his neighbors. In 1965, at the age of 36, Matsubishi began working at a steel mill managed by relatives in Kanagawa. Through an introduction, he remarried, this time to a woman who was understanding and took great care of him. She knew about his sensitivity to noise and was careful not to use the washing machine too much to avoid making noise. After their marriage, they moved from Kanagawa to work at a factory in Hachioji, Tokyo. Together, they lived in the employee dormitory, with Matsubishi working as a boiler operator and his wife managing the dormitory. Unfortunately, during this time, Matsubishi's noise sensitivity worsened. Even the sound of water when his wife showered would infuriate him, leading to instances of domestic violence. Matsubishi even went so far as to kill all the stray dogs in the area because their barking annoyed him. In the dormitory, a group of students moved in and held seances at night, creating a lot of noise. Matsubishi couldn't sleep, and the next day he angrily demanded they be quiet. But the noise continued the following night. Frustrated and unable to endure it any longer, Matsubishi quit his job and moved elsewhere. In April 1970, at the age of 41, Matsubishi and his wife moved to a large apartment complex called Tokiwa in Fujisawa, Kanagawa. This complex had over 50 buildings and more than 1,300 households. The buildings were 4 stories high, and Matsubishi's family lived on the 4th floor, in apartment 406 of building 34. About 2 months after moving in, a new family moved into the apartment below them, number 306. This family of 4 consisted of Okumura, a 32-year-old factory worker, his wife Bareko, a 29-year-old homemaker, and their 2 daughters, 4-year-old Sakura and newborn Nanao. In Japanese society, it is customary to give gifts to neighbors when moving into a new place as a gesture of politeness and to foster good relations. However, the Okumura family did not do this, leaving a poor first impression on Matsubishi. One reason Matsubishi chose this area was its quietness, away from the city center. But apartment buildings like these often had poor sound insulation, with walls only about 12 centimeters thick, meaning every noise from below could be heard clearly. The new family frequently opened and closed their windows, creating constant noise that irritated Matsubishi. To cope, he would shut his windows tightly and lay a thick mat on the floor to muffle the sounds from below. Despite these measures, the noise continued. Okumura had a hobby of woodworking and would hammer away on weekends, creating unbearable noise. Unable to stand it any longer, Matsubishi went downstairs to complain to the Okumura family, asking them to keep the noise down. Initially, this seemed to work, but soon Okumura resumed his noisy activities. On one occasion, just after Matsubishi complained, the noise started up again. Frustrated and feeling unheard, Matsubishi retaliated by making loud noises himself, earning a reputation as an eccentric troublemaker among his neighbors. After a while, Matsubishi noticed that the neighbors' attitudes towards him had become cold, while Okumura's wife was quite popular with them. But whenever Matsubishi met anyone, they looked at him as if he were a stranger. This led Matsubishi to believe that Bareko must have badmouthed him to the neighbors, causing his relationship with them to gradually deteriorate. Both families, living in apartments 306 and 406, had been coexisting in the building for over 3 years until 1973, when Japan began to focus on children's hobbies. Suddenly, families were sending their children to learn piano. According to statistics, 1 out of every 10 households owned a piano. Residents of the neighborhood followed this trend, buying pianos for their children. Because the sound of the piano was loud, the area set some regulations. Residents were only allowed to practice piano during the day and had to keep the windows closed to avoid disturbing others. However, a few people still practiced in the evening. By now, Okumura's eldest daughter, Sakura, was 7 years old and in the 2nd grade of elementary school. To nurture her interest, they spent 260,000 JPY on a piano, not realizing that this was the beginning of a tragedy. The haunting sound of the piano. Every afternoon after school, Sakura practiced at home. Matsubishi usually loved music, but since developing a noise-related illness, he had lost interest. When it got too loud, he would wear headphones just to reduce the external noise. However, the constant piano playing from downstairs made Matsubishi miserable. Unable to endure the noisy neighbors any longer, Matsubishi went to complain, asking them to refrain from playing the piano when he was at home. But his efforts were in vain, as the piano soon resumed. Once, Matsubishi visited apartment 306 when only Bareko was home. Bareko handed him a note saying that as long as they were alive, there would be noise. This remark made Matsubishi furious, leading him to think that indeed, if they were alive, there would be noise. If not, it would be quiet. Living in a noisy environment for a while, Matsubishi became impulsive, and his behavior towards his wife grew increasingly violent. Gradually, he began to have delusions, suspecting that the neighbors bought a piano to retaliate against him by playing it constantly. A year passed, and Matsubishi quit his job, surviving on a meager 7,000 JPY monthly unemployment benefit. His wife, unable to tolerate his violence, left and divorced him. Matsubishi was behind on rent for several months and received a warning that if he didn't pay by the end of August, he would be evicted. Under this pressure, his chronic headaches returned, accompanied by symptoms like tinnitus and hallucinations. During his unemployment, the noise from downstairs continued, making it hard for Matsubishi to eat or sleep. Whenever the piano played, Matsubishi would go to the library or find a quiet place to fish. Sometimes, he confided in friends, expressing that he found life meaningless and considered jumping into the sea to end it all. But his friends stopped him, as it wasn't the final solution. One evening, while passing by Okumura's house, a voice in Matsubishi's head said that if they didn't stop playing the piano, he would kill Okumura's wife and daughter. But it was just a thought. One day in August, Matsubishi went to complain to the Okumura family again, but upon arriving, he saw a note on the door saying, "The children are sleeping, please be quiet." This single line hit a nerve. They made noise every day, disturbing his rest, but now they were asking for quiet. Recently, Matsubishi had experienced significant psychological stress from events like his divorce, job loss, and the threat of eviction. The issue of the piano noise was the final straw that made him snap. Matsubishi rushed to a department store to buy tools for his crime, then quietly observed the Okumura family's routine, waiting for the right moment to act. The day before the incident, a new tenant referred to as Miss A moved into apartment 305 next to 306. After moving in, Miss A brought small gifts to each household, including Matsubishi's on the 4th floor. By then, Matsubishi had already decided to commit the crime. Though he had never done such a thing before, his reason was completely overshadowed by the beast within him, and he could no longer restrain it. The tragedy of a family. At 9:10 a.m., Matsubishi observed that Okumura had left for work, leaving only Bareko and her 2 daughters at home. Without waiting long, Matsubishi took his weapon and went to apartment 306. Bareko was taking out the trash with her youngest daughter, Naomi, leaving the door unlocked. The eldest daughter was practicing piano at home. Matsubishi broke in, first cutting the telephone cord in the hallway to prevent anyone from calling the police. Then, he rushed in and killed Sakura before hiding behind a soundproof panel. Not long after, 4-year-old Naomi returned home alone. Matsubishi sprang out and killed her too. Bareko, the final victim, also met a grim fate. Within 5 minutes, Matsubishi had taken 3 lives. After cleaning up the scene, he left a note explaining his reasons for the murders and fled apartment 306. Unexpectedly, he encountered Miss A, who had just moved in. Matsubishi, covered in blood, hurriedly ran downstairs. Miss A, curious about his blood-stained appearance, peeked into apartment 306, only to be horrified by the scene. She quickly ran out to call the police. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the scene. Bareko and her 2 daughters were dead. Based on Miss A's statement, Matsubishi immediately became a suspect, but his whereabouts were unknown, so the police contacted his friends and family. One friend mentioned that Matsubishi had once considered jumping into the sea to kill himself. The police mobilized over 200 officers to search the nearby coastal areas but could not find him. It turned out that after fleeing the scene, Matsubishi rode his motorcycle to Gongshan Station. His blood-stained clothes were too conspicuous, so he changed into a set of clothes he took from someone's house, then caught a bus to Fujiko and continued on a train to Kishiyama. He had no fixed destination and didn't know where he was going. In the following days, Matsubishi wandered around the outskirts of Tokyo, disposing of the murder weapons. At night, he stealthily slept in cars parked by the roadside. 3 days after the incident, Matsubishi could no longer endure the wandering life and turned himself in at the police station. He confessed to the entire process and motive for his crimes and led the police to where he had disposed of the murder weapons. After evaluation, Matsubishi was diagnosed with a mental illness. 2 months later, the case went to trial. The focus of the trial was to determine whether the noise from the Okumura household was indeed a disturbance. The prosecutor presented a scientific report indicating that a normal environment for human hearing is around 10 dB, whispering is between 20 to 40 dB, a noisy environment is between 30 to 40 dB, noise above 50 dB can affect sleep and rest, and noise above 60 dB is harmful to the ears. If people live in an environment with high noise levels for too long, it can severely impact their nervous, respiratory, and psychological systems. A police report indicated that during the day, the average noise level from the Okumura family's piano was 44 dB, and when children were playing, the noise would be masked. At night, it peaked at only 48 dB. The fate of the murderer. Most people believe that the death penalty was the most appropriate punishment for him. However, the defense managed to bring in a witness, Matsubishi's ex-wife. She testified that the noise from the Okumura household was indeed quite bothersome, with windows being opened and closed over 20 times a day, making people feel mentally uneasy. Based on this, the defense argued that when the police measured the noise, the person playing was an experienced police officer who could adjust the volume. In reality, the noise could have been much louder than what was recorded. During the trial, the defendant Matsubishi showed no remorse. He even said to the judge, "I want to be sentenced to death." The case took a year to conclude. The judge believed that Matsubishi had no regard for others. Using his brutal methods, he killed 3 people and caused societal impact, showing no remorse for his crimes. The court convicted Matsubishi of murder and other charges. After receiving the death sentence, Matsubishi did not want to appeal, but his defense attorney proceeded with the appeal and convinced him to sign the appeal form. The Noise Victims Association in Japan expressed deep sympathy for Matsubishi, initiating a call for the court to show leniency towards him. More than 6 months after the initial verdict, the Tokyo High Court held an appeal hearing. The judge re-evaluated Matsubishi's mental state. Doctors had examined Matsubishi over 10 times, concluding that he was suffering from paranoid delusions when he committed the crimes. This is a severe mental illness where patients believe their thoughts are true, uncontrollable, and cannot be understood as mere illusions of persecution or relationship delusions. Based on this psychological report, the court might dismiss the death penalty or even declare him innocent. During the trial, Matsubishi firmly withdrew his appeal without waiting for his defense attorney's opinion. He wrote that if he avoided the death penalty or received a life sentence, his life would not be much better, as he suffered from chronic noise-related illnesses, not only losing sleep, but also deteriorating in health daily. Life in prison would make him suicidal. Therefore, he believed the best option was the death penalty, even with the diagnosis of mental instability. There are records that during his detention, Matsubishi frequently complained about the noise from the adjacent cell. His defense attorney submitted a petition to the court, arguing that the withdrawal of the appeal was done in a state of psychological instability, meaning his wishes were meaningless. The judge stated that even if Matsubishi escaped the death penalty, he would not be able to endure the pain caused by insomnia due to his noise sensitivity while being detained for a long period. Furthermore, Matsubishi had grown tired of life and wanted to leave quietly. Therefore, he wanted the death penalty. Although reluctantly, he still had the legal capacity to sue and had achieved awareness of his death. This was legally sound, and the court ultimately upheld the death sentence for Daiheiso Matsubishi, thus officially closing the case. In Japan, there are no shortages of similar cases. In the same year, in October, Watanabe Tetsuo, a 24-year-old man in Kawasaki, Kanagawa Prefecture, owned a Siberian husky. Its barking disturbed the sleep of Kobayashi Masako, a 35-year-old bar owner and neighbor. Kobayashi complained to Tetsuo that the apartment complex did not allow dogs, and that the barking was extremely noisy, making it impossible for him to rest. The two men argued, and in a fit of rage, Masako threw the dog from the 8th floor, killing it instantly. Both men had to go to the police station, and Masako was ordered to pay 170,000 JPY in compensation, but it didn't end there. One night, Tetsuo and his wife were dining at a small restaurant and saw the owner had a cute dog reminding Tetsuo of his beloved pet. When they returned to their apartment, Tetsuo and his wife burst into Masako's apartment and repeatedly stabbed him, resulting in his death. During interrogation, Watanabe Tetsuo said that he loved his dog so much that it was like a child to him. Due to the increasing number of noise-related incidents, the Japanese government had no choice but to enact some related laws. For instance, singing karaoke or causing loud noise in residential areas is now considered illegal. The apartment complex where Matsubishi lived had a floor thickness of only 12 centimeters between the floors. After the incident, it was mandated to increase the thickness to 15 centimeters to prevent further noise disputes. The piano industry in Japan also faced a significant impact and had to undergo a major revolution. Some traditional mechanical pianos were replaced with digital pianos, allowing people to connect headphones or smart devices while playing, thus eliminating the issue of disturbing others. To this day, Matsubishi, now 94 years old, remains imprisoned in a Tokyo jail, making him the oldest prisoner currently awaiting execution in Japan. So, a minor conflict led to a very serious incident. Matsubishi's childhood illness was also one of the causes leading to this event. What do you think would have happened if the residents of apartment 306 had been willing to listen, and Matsubishi had shown a bit more patience? In any case, bad deeds reap bad outcomes. There may be sympathy, but the punishment cannot be lenient. And that concludes today's case. Are you troubled by noise where you live? What are your thoughts on today's case? Leave your comments below so we can discuss further. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for support. For now, goodbye and see you next time.